Very warm welcome to our English session of today. Very happy to meet you through this video. Hope you are preparing your lessons well and ready to face the examination also, right? Don't waste your time, children. Prepare your lessons and work hard. Don't take it easily. I have heard so many parents, one 10th standard parent said to me, my child studies very well. His brother also studies very well and he got very good marks in the 10th standard. Now my son is in 10th, second son, and he is also a very intelligent boy. But now he is not at all bothering about his studies. He is attending the classes and no revision at all. When the class stops, he also stops his opening his books, touching the books, and he is just watching, playing with the mobile, all these things. So don't do it because we do not know how we are going to face the examination, what all the changes that we are going to get, how we are going to face the examination is a question mark. So whatever may be the situation, we must equip ourselves well to face the situation, right? Right. The status of Tamil as a classical language. I told you on that day about Tirukkural. I still remember my Tamil teacher says, Kal thonti, man thonta, kalathu, mun thonti, mootha kudi. We are really proud to say that we are Tamilians. How many epics we have in Tamil? Manimeghalai, Sivaga Sintamani, Valayabadi, Kundalagesi, all these epics. See, if you take this Tirukkural, our teachers, they will say that in the first line you must have four this thing. There is a word there. Adi piralamal eludu. Adi piralamal eludu. And the values which are cited in this Tirukkural, we are really proud to say that we have a poet, Thiruvalluvar, in our Tamil Nadu. We are feeling proud to say that we got that poet in Tamil. Such a rich literature it is. And Indian epics, Ramayanam and Mahabharatam, Tamil epics. If you take even that English literature, we don't have this much vast, rich literature and books. And in this Tirukkural, our teachers our teachers used to teach us that Tirukkural for the sake of learning something. We will be learning and reciting and getting marks without knowing the meaning of it. But later in your life, if you go through this, அகர முதல் எழுத்தெல்லாம் ஆதி பகவன் முதற்றே உலகு தொட்டனை தூறும் மலர்கேணி மாந்தர்க்கு கட்டணை தூறும் அறிவு. See how rich his words are, the thoughts are. You see a human being very often. In my lower class, when I was studying 9th, 8th and 10th, I used to curse the Tamil teachers like anything because very often I forget that Kodupadum, Edupadum, Tupparku, Tuppaya, Tupparku. It is a great headache for me. But later in my life, when I read this Tirukkural, I could understand that he is a human being, that Thiruvalluvar. How could he write all these things? We have, just like Bible, we have answers for almost all the questions that we face in our life, doubts that we have in our life today. Right? Such a rich literature our Tamil has. And Tamil as a classical language, whether this Tamil can be called as a classical language. And here, George L. Hart just analyzes what all the qualities that a language must have to have the status of the classical language. And he analyzes Tamil language, and he says that Tamil language has all the characters that is needed for a classical language. He says that Tamil can be called as a classical language because it has got almost all the characteristics that is needed for a classical language. Right? This Mr. George L. Hart is a linguistic and anthropologist. He made an attempt to make a comparative study of classical language of the world. Greek, Spanish, German, all these languages. Professor Maraimalai has asked him to give an idea whether Tamil can be called as a classical language. Just a response to this, he has written this prose piece. The position of Tamil as a classical language, whether Tamil can be called as a classical language, right? He is a professor, the head of the Department of Tamil in the University of Carolina since 1975. At present, he holds the Tamil chair there. What is Tamil chair? Just to improve and spread the culture and the language in foreign countries, we have a Tamil chair in universities, right? We have to donate a great amount of money for establishing the Tamil chair in the other languages chair in the other countries. So we have this man, George L. Hart, holds the Tamil chair in that University of Carolina. He has done his degree in Sanskrit, so he is very much well versed in Sanskrit. He was appointed as a professor of Sanskrit in the University of Wisconsin. Besides Tamil and Sanskrit, he also has learnt Greek and Latin. He has read extensively in their literature in the original. So he knows Greek, Latin, Sanskrit, Tamil, and he has read the literature in original. He has a strong grounding in the comparative linguistics and literature of the modern Europe. In recognition of his deep knowledge of Indian classical languages, he has conferred Padma Shri Award, the third highest civilian honor. He was awarded Padma Shri Award for his linguistic, comparative linguistics and literature. Here in this prose piece, he discusses, he analyzes why could we call this Tamil as a classical language. He says Tamil is a classical language with classical tradition and classical literature. It has a rich tradition and it has a rich literature, so it must be called as a classical language. And he gives three important things to make Tamil a classical language of the world. He says that it can stand with Greek, Latin, Arabic, and Sanskrit. The first reason he gives for being called as a classical language is its antiquity, the ancientness. As I said, கல் தோன்றி மண் தோன்றா காலத்து முன் தோன்றி மூத்த குடி. The antiquity of it, the ancientness. Sangam literature, பத்து பாட்டு in Tamil, the date of it is the first 2 centuries of the current era. In that first century and the second century, we have a Sangam literature and பத்து பாட்டு, all these things. So, first reason why he calls it as a classical language is the antiquity of Tamil, the ancientness of Tamil, vast literature. From that time immemorial, from the first century itself, we have Sangam literature, பத்து பாட்டு, all these things. The second reason why he calls it as a classical language is it possesses literary tradition independent of Sanskrit or any other Indian languages. It has literary tradition of its own. It is totally independent. It is not depending on Sanskrit. It is not depending on other Indian languages also. In fact, Tamil has influenced Sanskrit a lot. In fact, Tamil has influenced Sanskrit and Malayalam to a great extent. So the first reason is its antiquity. Second reason is its independence, traditional independence. The third reason he gives is to stand beside the great literature of Sanskrit, Greek, Persian and Arabic. It can stand along with the Greek literature, Sanskrit literature, Persian literature and Arabic literature. The subtlety, the profundity of its language, the Tamil works, the universality, quality of it qualifies Tamil to be rated as one of the greatest classical tradition of the world. If you take Tirukkural, it is one of the world's greatest work on ethics. It covers almost every facts of human life, right? So, after analyzing all these things, after studying all these things, our author is very firm, very confident. He is of the opinion that it can be called as a classical language. It is extremely old as Latin and even older than Arabic languages. It arises as it has an independent tradition with no influence from Sanskrit or any of the Indian languages. There is God's plenty in Tamil language. It is established beyond doubt that Tamil is one of the greatest classical languages of the world. It has become a vital and central part of the greatness and riches of the Indian culture. Right? If you go through the Indian Tamil literature, you could understand the richness of its language, the tradition, the culture, the antiquity, the ancientness that we have. And we are really proud to say that we are Tamilians. We are Tamilians. And this language as our teachers feels proud to say us that Kal Thondi Man Thondra Kalathu. It is there. The great Pattu Pattu, Padinan Keelkanaku, and all this vast literature we have from memorial, time immemorial, from the first century even, that really, that we can say really that it can be called as a classical language. So here author just analyzes, make a comparative study of our Tamil language with other famous languages like Greek, Latin, French, Germanian languages, and says that for its antiquity and for its independent tradition, and finally for its influence on other languages. It can be called as a classical language. It can stand equally with Sanskrit, Greek, Persian, and Arabian languages. So it can be called as a classical language. Now let us see it in detail. Why author says that Tamil can be called as a classical language. The status of Tamil as a classical language. Take page number 142, children, with a pencil or pen in your hand. Right. Name a few languages spoken in India. Tell me some languages that is spoken in India. Tamil, Hindi, Urdu, Telugu, all these things. Then mention a few international languages. Spanish, French, Latin, Hebrew, Greek, English, etc. The box below gives detail of a few languages and their origin. Arrange them chronologically. Chinese, Hebrew, Latin, Tamil, Greek, Sanskrit, and Arabic. And the details of the origin of this language is given. Now arrange it. First one is Sanskrit. Second, Greek. Third one, Chinese. Fourth, Hebrew. 5, Tamil. 6, Latin. 7, Arabic. Following are some of the great works of Tamil. Find out their names by filling in the missing letter. First one, N. Nattinai. N-A-R-T-I-N-A-I. Nattinai. Second one, Tolkapiyam. T-H-O-L-K-A-P-P-I-Y-A-M. Tolkapiyam. Next one, Manimekalai. M-A-N-I-M-E-K-A-L-A-I. The fourth one, Pattu Pattu. P-A-T-T-U-P-P-A-T-T-U. Pattu Pattu. Next one, It is Purananuru. Oh, Purananuru. The last one is Tirukkural. Right. Dr. U.V. Saminatha Iyer. He is known as Tamil Tata. Right? And this U.V. Saminatha Iyer, along with Damodara Pillai, they are very great Tamil scholars, had collected old palm leaf and paper manuscripts and catalogued them. They had also edited most of the classical texts for the first time. Primary sources, immediate first-hand accounts from people, or original documents, reports by people who witnessed the events. Secondary source, cover or quote the primary source for interpretation. Now let us see about our author. Mr. George L. Hart, a linguist and anthropologist, endeavors to make a comparative analysis of classical languages of the world. Now let us see which language emerged as the best among equals from his point of view. It is his point of view that we can see that our status of Tamil. Right? He was a Tamil lecturer and he focuses on the relation between Tamil and Sanskrit literature. In 2015, the Padma Shri Award was awarded to him. He studied Latin, Greek, Sanskrit and other European languages. Right. He endeavors to make a comparative analysis of classical languages of the world. Right. It is written in 2000, April 11. Professor Maraimalai has asked me to write regarding the position of Tamil as a classical language. And I am delighted to respond to his request. I am writing this in response to the request made by Professor Maraimalai, who has asked me to write about the position of Tamil as a classical language. I have been a professor of Tamil at the University of California, Berkeley since 1975 and I am currently holder of the Tamil chair at that institution. Now, what is a Tamil chair is given there in this next page. In page number 144, there is a question, do you know? There is a box there. What is a Tamil chair is given. Tamil chair is set up to protect Tamil culture and language across the globe and give the classical Tamil language a sense of pride. So, Tamil chair is set up to protect the Tamil culture and language over the world. And it is established as a mark of pride. For instance, the Harvard Tamil chair may cost around 40 crore rupees. So, to establish a Tamil chair in other universities, other countries, how much money is needed? 40 crores. That involves recruitment fee and course implementation fees. So, there, in that, if there is a Tamil chair there, the students of that university can learn that language and our culture, our language will be established even in foreign countries also. Right. So, here he was holding the Tamil chair at the institution. My degree, which I received in 1970, is in Sanskrit. I got my BA degree in Sanskrit language from Harvard University. And my first employment was a Sanskrit professor at the University of Wisconsin-Madison in 1969. Beside Tamil and Sanskrit, I know the classical languages of Latin and Greek and have read extensively in the literature in the original. I know Tamil, I read Tamil, Sanskrit. Other than that, the classical languages like Latin, Greek, and I have read the literature of that great Greek and Latin languages in its original scripts. I am also well acquainted with comparative linguistics and the literatures of modern Europe. I am well acquainted with, I am familiar with the modern literatures of modern European countries also. English also maybe. Let me state unequivocally that by any criteria, one may choose Tamil is one of the greatest classical literatures and traditions of the world. So, without any doubt, without any ambiguity, certainly I could state that Tamil is a classical language. It has the classical tradition. The reason for this are many. Let me consider them one by one after another. I will just give you why I call Tamil as a classical language. Since I am a well-versed person of Tamil, Greek, Latin, and the Indian languages and the other European languages, I can very well say that Tamil can be called as a classical language. The reasons for this are many. There are many reasons to say that Tamil is a classical language. Let me consider them one by one. One after another, I will just narrate why I call this Tamil as a classical language. First, Tamil is of considerable antiquity, ancientness. It has ample antiquity. It has plenty of antiquity. Even from the first century itself, we have vast literature in Tamil, like Pattu Pattu, all these things. It predates the literatures of other modern Indian languages by more than 1,000 years. So it is older than 1,000 years from the other modern Indian languages. That is why it is said Kaltonti Mantonda Kaltu. Its oldest work, the Tolkappiyam, contains parts that, judging from the earliest Tamil inscriptions, date back to about 200 BCE. BCE is before Common Christian era or before Common Current era. The greatest works of ancient Tamil, the Sangam anthologies and the Pattu Pattu, date to the first 2 centuries of the current era. So Pattu Pattu and this ancient Sangam literature dated to the first 2 centuries. They are the first great secular body of poetry written in India. So they are the first great secular body. India is a secular country. What is secular? Non-religious. Of poetry written in India. So first Indian secular body of poetry is written in Tamil. Are we not feeling proud to say that? We are Tamilians. We have such a rich heritage, such a rich tradition. Predating Kalidasa's works by 200 years. Kalidasa's work is predated by 200 years. This Pattu Pattu, all these things. So it is the first secular poet. So first reason why he considers it as a classical language is its antiquity, its ancientness. It predates to Sangam literature, the first 2 centuries. Even the other literatures of the Indian languages. And the first poetry, secular poetry, is written in Tamil, which predates Kalidasa's maybe Ramayana, 200 years. The second reason why he considers this as a classical language is the Tamil constitutes the only literary tradition indigenous to India that is not derived from Sanskrit. It has its own tradition, not borrowed from any other countries, any other languages, any other states. It is its native style, literary tradition. It has its own native tradition, Tamil tradition. It never borrows anything from anybody. That is not derived from Sanskrit. Indeed, its literature arises before the influence of Sanskrit in the south became strong and so is qualitatively different from anything we have in Sanskrit or other Indian languages. So actually speaking, it is our Tamil literature is written before that Sanskrit literature. It predates. It has its own poetic theory, its own grammatical tradition, its own aesthetics, and above all, a large body of literature that is quite unique. It has its own poetic theory. It stands on its own. It has its uniqueness. It has its peculiar characters. Grammatical tradition. It has its own grammar. Right, if you take English grammar, we are learning direct, indirect speech, article, preposition, and symbol, compound, complex, all this. So many grammar items that we are learning, even from the third standard itself. But in all the grammatical things, the teachers will teach us so many things. But there is an exception. For each and every rule in English, we have an exception. That means there is no rule, just like our Indian government rule. Right? All the rule has its own escapism. Through that small holes, all the criminals of India escapes and well settled in life. And we people feel very proud to say that we have a very good law and order and all these things, right? So here he is very proud to say that it has its own tradition, its own native, indigenous, it is native to India. It is not derived from Sanskrit, and it has its own influence. It did not borrow anything from the Sanskrit literature, but it is predated at Sanskrit literature also. It has its own poetic theory, it has its own grammatical tradition, its own aesthetics, that is sense of beauty in writing. Above all, a large body of literature that is quite unique. It has its own peculiar characters, unique characters, which is pertaining only to Tamil. Right? So, because of all these things, author says that it can be called as a classical language. It shows a sort of Indian sensibility that is quite different from anything in Sanskrit or other Indian languages. And it contains its own extremely rich and vast intellectual tradition. So, it has its own Indian sensibility other than the Tamil. Indian sensibility is there, but it has a very vast intellectual tradition. So it has its own tradition. That is the second reason. Third, the quality of classical Tamil literature is such that it is fit to stand beside the great literatures of Sanskrit, Greek, Latin, Chinese, Persian, and Arabic. So it can stand with all the greatest literatures of the world. Tamil can stand along with the great literatures of the world like Sanskrit, Greek, Latin, Chinese, Persian, and Arabic. The subtlety, the distinction, and profundity, the sophistication of the language, of its work, their varied scope. Tamil is the only pre-modern Indian literature to treat the suburban extensively. Right? These are the reason. It can stand along with Greek, Latin, Chinese, Persian, and Arabic languages. Right? Right. We'll see the remaining in the next class, children. Read what is being completed so far. Bye.